Atari was founded in 1972 by video game pioneer Nolan Bushnell, the man who had created the first coin-operated video game, Computer Space, and had brought Pong to the masses. Although the early games were impressive simply because they existed, Atari's coin-op division truly entered a golden age in the late 70s and early 80s, when titles like Asteroids, Battlezone, and Tempest ruled the arcades. In this package are arcade-perfect conversions of 6 of those great games: Super Breakout, Battlezone, Tempest, Missile Command, Asteroids, and Centipede. Together, these games have grossed hundreds of millions of dollars in arcades across the world, and thanks to special emulation technology from Digital Eclipse, you can now play the games on your console system exactly as they were in the arcade. Even the bugs are still there. But just playing the games doesn't do them historical justice, which is why we've provided background information and exclusive insight into the games from the creative geniuses behind them. Ed Logg, who created Asteroids, Super Breakout, and was co-creator of Centipede with Donna Bailey; Dave Toyer, who created Tempest and Missile Command; and Ed Rotberg, designer and programmer of Battlezone. What was it like at Atari during this golden age? How could so many great games come from one company? As Ed Rotberg explains, the people had a lot to do with it.
I think one of the really wonderful things about having been at Atari during that period of time of the late 70s, early 80s was the people that worked there, the entire group of people, and not just as individuals, but we not only worked together, but we socialized together, we played together. It was a real camaraderie that I've never seen quite duplicated to that extent anywhere else.
With such creative people around, Atari took an interesting tack towards game development. Once assigned, a project was under the direction of a single programmer, but game concepts were developed communally at off-site brainstorming sessions. Here's Ed Rotberg discussing the sessions.
The brainstorming sessions really reflected a lot of the culture that went on at Atari at that time, and it was really nice. People were encouraged to submit ideas and not be critical of other people's ideas, but to take them and run with them. Eventually, they became people became more and more prepared. They were less extemporaneous than they were in the early days, but it was really a hotbed of creativity. We had a number of extremely creative as well as technically proficient people at Atari, and it was just a wonderful time to be around all that good energy and all of that creativity.
Of course, not all the creativity went towards finished products. Quite a bit was devoted to just having fun. Atari was an entertainment company, after all. Most of the jokes grew out of strange products, and often they came at the expense of an engineer's favorite target, the marketing department. Ed Logg explains how one aborted game concept, turtle races, that popped up at every session turned into a long-running prank.
At one point, year after year, we've done the same thing at brainstorming sessions. Our VP of marketing got up and said, "Okay, guys, absolutely no more turtles. No more turtles. Absolutely no more turtles." And so later in the brainstorm, we had one of the waiters bring up a drink for him because he was thirsty. And we got one of these little wind-up turtles. We stuck it in the drink, and so it goes plop, 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 plop. We hand it up to him, and he just takes the glass, and there's splash, splash, splash. Everybody's breaking out and laughing.
It didn't end there. In addition to sending the marketing director turtle cards and turtle dolls, Ed Logg made a little change to the golden edition of Asteroids that sat in Atari's lobby.
Turtleroids. That was another joke. So what I did was I took asteroids and I replaced the small and large saucers with turtles. And so, we had the golden edition out in the lobby of Atari. And so I went in and swapped the game proms, and they had these turtles floating around. And so one day he walked in, looked, and sure enough, they're turtles.
Still, once a game was decided on, the creators got to work hard. Because it's impossible to tell if concepts on paper will really work as games. The products often change dramatically between assignment and finished product, as Ed, Dave, and Ed discuss here.
You start out with one idea in mind, and as you're playing it, you may find that people are creating their own game in the way that they play it, or there's one particular part of the game that's more fun than the rest of it. So the game kind of dictates where it should go, by people's response to it. And they change as they go. It's not like, well, we had this idea and we made it happen just like that. It doesn't happen that way very often.
For example, Tempest started out as first-person Space Invaders, and I brought it up. We played it. We had a marketing review, and they said, "This is first-person Space Invaders, but it's not much fun. Do you have any ideas, Dave?" And I says, "Well, I got this idea where there's this hole in the ground and there's monsters coming out, and I can make this thing into that hole in the ground nightmare." And so they came back like 2 weeks later, and they said, "This is fun. Let's do this," and that was Tempest.
I had another case too. Centipede was originally, all the mushrooms were fixed position. You couldn't shoot them, and there weren't anything to create them. And it was Dan Banner, a VP, during one of the reviews said, isn't there some way we can, shoot the mushrooms? Because he wanted to shoot the mushrooms, get them out of the way. And I said, well, if I shoot the mushrooms, I'm going to have somebody create them, and probably another person that eats them up, and so on. And that's basically how it came about. All the spider could eat the mushrooms, and anytime you shoot a centipede, it would stick one back. And I would a certain number of shots to get rid of it. And so that's how a game developed. And once I added that, it was suddenly, this is fun.
Even after a game was mostly done, it was still possible to make changes. That's where the field tests came in. In field tests, which are still done today with new coin ops, a prototype version of the game is secretly shipped to an arcade to judge players' reactions. If they're good, the game moves into production. If not, the project is either killed or revamped. The period just before an initial field test is the most stressful in the development cycle.
You'd kill yourself to get your game ready for the field test.
Yeah.
You'd work around the clock, sometimes 4 days in a row without sleeping.
And when those results would come in, it was,
it was worth it. Yeah.
it's like you'd look at them, and if they were good, it was like, wow, this is the best feeling in the world. And if they were not so good, what can I do?
In fact, for Ed Logg, it was the most important element in the entire development cycle of the game.
For me, the most important was field test, where you can walk up, and if the kid puts his money in, sort of gets frustrated, but puts his money back in again, that's okay. I got him.
When they had to put a sign on your game that said maximum two plays per person, then you knew you had a hit.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to go to a field test and find all your competitors there checking out your product.
Yep.
That was always a good sign too. Well, it's a good and bad sign, because that means they know about it. They know where you're testing, which is, bad. But the other part is they're so interested in your game, they're out there taking pictures, videotapes, and sending them back to their headquarters.
Even in the midst of this most difficult time in the development of the game, in such a stressful environment, the engineers never lost their sense of humor.
One of the guys had worked all night on his video game, and they had a field test the next afternoon, and they threw it in the back of the pickup, went screaming all the way to
They didn't strap it down.
They didn't strap it down good enough. They went around a corner, the game went over the backside of the truck and smashed in a million pieces.
It was great. They brought back the parts, and they put them back in the lab, and I took a piece of paper and I wrote "failed field test" and slapped it on there.
Of course, making light of the occasional disaster wasn't the only way the engineers let off steam. There was plenty of fun to be had in the labs as well.
Oh, well, one of the engineers was working on a new PC board, and so one of the guys decided, to pull a little prank on him, and after Dave had gone home, this other gentleman, who shall remain nameless, wired up a flash bulb, a flash cube, to the bottom side of the board, hooking it up to plus 12 in ground, so that the next morning when Dave came in and plugged his board in, he got this huge flash and puff of smoke out from the bottom of his board, and caused immediate panic.
One of the better consequences of having a lab full of game designers was that, in addition to endless streams of practical jokes, the creators had instant access to some very tough testers. Ed Rotberg explains.
One way you can really tell that a game is exciting, a game is going to be successful, is if people are playing it in the lab.
Of course, sometimes a game got too popular. In early prototypes, there was only one copy of the game in existence, and if you had to keep shooing people off your development hardware, it could get annoying. This very situation led to a legendary Atari development prank.
Ed was constantly having to kick people, and in particular Owen Rubin, off of his asteroid station so that he could work on it. And so Owen would stay late at night, and he would fill up the high score table with his initials. And everybody was getting tired of this, so Ed put in some code to check for all the variations of Owen Rubin's initials, and whenever he would put it would put in Ed's initials instead.
He came back and said, "Hey, I think there's a bug in your program. I stuck my name and my initials in, and it didn't show up." And so we let it go on for a day or two. Finally, told him.
As hard as they played, the creators of these games worked even harder, sometimes to the limits of their physical and mental endurance. Dave Toyer recounts how the desire to create a great game could lead to total exhaustion.
The way I like to work best is when I can really get into it and just sort of you load your mind up with everything that has to be done in that part of your program, and it's hard to get into that state of mind, and once you get there, I hate to leave. So I basically threw out the 24-hour day and would just work until I get so tired I couldn't stay awake anymore, and then go home and sleep, then come back and go to work. But the worst times, or the most intense times, were just before a field test, sometimes when I'd go for 3 or 4 days without any sleep. I remember one time I had a field test on Friday, and I'd been up for 4 days in a row, and I actually got the game ready to go, but I was so tired I couldn't work the machine that burned the ROMs anymore, because I couldn't remember how to punch the buttons on the keyboard. So I had to invite one of my buddies in to work the keys, and I just had to sort of say, "Okay, you do this and this," and he worked the buttons for me.
In the end, though, the hard work more than paid off. Nearly 20 years later, the popularity of these classic Atari games is as high as it ever was. Now, with this collection, we can again enjoy these classic titles. As for Ed, Dave, and Ed, all are still involved in some way with the game industry. How do they feel about all the interest people still have in their early work? Ed Rotberg sums it up best.
I get email from people who found me on the web or somehow or another and found out an address, and they tell me how much they enjoyed the game, and it feels great. Well beyond any money that might have been made, and believe me, it wasn't that much. To just to have people know that people had some fun, and enjoyed something you did, that you created, is one of the best feelings in the world.
Ed Logg, with help from Donna Bailey, created Centipede in 1981. With easy track. Ed Logg, with help. Can't wait? All right, go play. you